The trophy was found by a dog, not the World Cup itself, obviously. A real, actual four-legged dog with a wet nose. In 1966, before the biggest tournament on Earth, the most famous trophy in football was stolen, hunted by police, given up for dead, and then dug out from under a suburban hedge by a good boy named Pickles. And honestly, that's not even the weirdest thing that's happened at a World Cup. So buckle up. We're doing the single wildest moment from almost every World Cup. And it starts with two teams arguing about whose ball to use. Let's rewind to 1930, Uruguay, the very first World Cup ever. Now you'd think every football nation on the planet would sprint to sign up. They did not. Because to get there from Europe, you had to spend roughly 2 weeks on a boat crossing the Atlantic Ocean, each way. And most European teams took one look at that itinerary and said, you know what? We're good. In the end, only 13 teams showed up, and just 4 of them were European. It was less a global tournament and more a small, seasick gathering of the brave, some of them jogging laps on the ship's deck because there was nothing to do for a fortnight but pass the same seagull. And then came the final, Uruguay versus Argentina. Bitter neighbors, enormous rivalry, and before kickoff, they hit a snag so petty it's beautiful. Both teams brought their own ball, and both flatly refused to use the other one. This is the World Cup final, and grown men are essentially fighting over whose toy comes out of the box. So the referee brokered the most diplomatic compromise in sports history. Argentina's ball for the first half, Uruguay's ball for the second. And wouldn't you know it, at halftime, playing with Argentina's ball, Argentina led 2-1. Then out came Uruguay's ball for the second half, and Uruguay stormed all the way back to win 4-2. The host became the very first world champions on home soil with their own ball, second half. Make of that ball theory what you will. Now here's where the story does something strange. The World Cup was born in 1930, and it kept going. There was 1934, held in Italy, under the not at all subtle shadow of Mussolini, who treated the whole thing as a fascist advertising campaign and made very clear he expected Italy to win. Spoiler, Italy won. Then 1938 in France, and Italy won again, back to back. 2 tournaments, ticking along nicely. And then the World Cup simply vanished. For 12 straight years, no 1942, no 1946, because the world had bigger, far darker things to deal with. The Second World War swallowed everything, and both of those tournaments were canceled outright. Football, like a lot of things, had to wait. So the greatest show on earth went dark for over a decade, and only flickered back to life in 1950. And when it returned, it delivered one of the most heartbreaking afternoons the sport has ever known. 1950, Brazil. The hosts had built a cathedral to football, the Maracanazo, and going into the deciding match against Uruguay, Brazil didn't even need to win. This wasn't a normal one-off final. It was decided in a final group, and Brazil sat on top. A simple draw would hand them the trophy. So nearly 200,000 people packed into the Maracanazo, the largest crowd ever to watch a football match, absolutely certain they were about to witness a coronation. The newspapers had already printed Brazil champions. A victory song was already written. The whole nation had already started to celebrate. Brazil even took the lead. And then Uruguay, quiet, ruthless Uruguay, refused to read the script. They equalized. And then Alcides Guilla scored again, and Uruguay won 2-1. As the final whistle blew, the largest crowd in the history of the sport fell into a silence so total, so heavy, that Brazilians gave it a name they still use today, the Maracanazo. A country that had come to crown itself went home in mourning instead. Some of those players carried that afternoon for the rest of their lives. It remains the deepest wound in Brazilian football. Some heartbreaks never really heal. Okay, deep breath. Because 16 years later, we get one of the goofiest true stories sport has ever produced. 1966, England is about to host the World Cup, and a few months before kickoff, the solid gold Jules Rimet trophy, the actual World Cup, goes on public display in London, and someone steals it, just walks off with the most famous trophy on earth. National panic, Scotland Yard on the case, global embarrassment. The tournament didn't even have a trophy to hand out. And then it's found, not by a detective, not by Interpol, but by a dog. A man named David Corbett was out walking his little black and white collie, Pickles, when the dog started sniffing furiously at a bush in South London and dug out a lumpy package wrapped in old newspaper. Inside the World Cup. Pickles became a national hero. He got a medal. He reportedly got to lick the plates at the celebration banquet and earned more from film offers than some of the actual players. And England went on to win the whole tournament, beating West Germany 4-2 after extra time, with Jeff Hurst scoring a hat trick, which means the most valuable member of that squad may well have been a dog named Pickles. Now fast forward to 1986, Mexico, and the single most bananas 4 minutes one player has ever produced. Quarterfinal. Argentina versus England. Enter Diego Maradona, small, magical, and about to do two completely opposite things back to back. First, the crime. Maradona goes up for a high ball against the England keeper and, being roughly the height of a fire hydrant, cannot possibly reach it with his head. So he reaches up and punches it into the net with his fist. Blatant. Illegal. Everyone in the stadium sees it. Everyone except the one man who matters, the referee who allows the goal. Afterwards, Maradona grinned and said it was scored a little with the head and a little with the hand of God. The hand of God, he literally cheated and gave God the assist. And then 4 minutes later, the same man does the exact opposite of cheating. He picks the ball up in his own half and he simply goes. Past one England player, then another, dancing through basically the entire team over 60 yards before rolling it in. It's since been voted the goal of the century. Same man, same match, 4 minutes apart, one goal you'd get sent off for, one goal you'd frame on your wall, and Argentina went on to win the whole thing. You genuinely could not script it. Now I need you to slow down with me, because the next story isn't funny at all. 1994, the World Cup comes to the United States, and Colombia arrive as one of the most talented, most fancied teams in the world. But in a group stage match against the host nation, their gentle, beloved defender, Andrés Escobar, stretches to cut out a cross and accidentally turns it into his own net, an own goal. The United States won 2-1, and Colombia were knocked out far earlier than anyone expected. These things happen in football. They're supposed to be forgotten by the next match. But days later, back home in Medellin, Andrés Escobar was shot and killed. He was 27 years old, a quiet, gracious man, murdered over a mistake in a game. The football world was shattered. And every time we all get swept up in the joy and the noise of this tournament, Escobar's story is the one that pulls us back. A reminder that it was always only a game, and that no result on any pitch is worth a single human life. He is remembered with enormous love. We let that one stand in silence. Let's walk gently back toward the light, because the World Cup never stops surprising you. In 2010 in South Africa, the whole planet was introduced to the vuvuzela, those plastic horns that turned every single match into the sound of a giant, angry swarm of bees the size of a country. You could not escape the buzzing. Somewhere out there, a commentator is still hearing it in his dreams. And in that same tournament, in the dying seconds of a quarterfinal, with Ghana about to score the winner, Uruguay's Luis Suárez simply reached up and swatted the ball off his own goal line with both hands, like a volleyball player who wandered onto the wrong pitch. He got sent off, but Ghana missed the resulting penalty, Uruguay won, and Suárez celebrated his red card like he'd won the lottery. Cheating? Absolutely. Effective? Devastatingly. Which brings us to 2006, and one of the strangest endings any legend has ever written for himself. The final in Berlin, France versus Italy. Zinedine Zidane, France's genius, one of the greatest ever to play the game, is retiring the moment this match ends, win or lose. He's minutes from walking off into legend. And then in extra time, Italy's Marco Materazzi says something to him. We still don't fully know what, but Zidane turns around, lowers his head, and headbutts him square in the chest, flat to the ground. Red card. In the final. In the last game he would ever play. And so the greatest player of his generation walks straight off the pitch, past the glittering golden trophy on its little podium, without so much as a glance. Italy went on to win it on penalties, 5-3. Sometimes the most human thing a hero can do is spectacularly lose the plot on the biggest stage there is. So there it is. Nearly a century of a tournament that couldn't be scripted if you tried. A trophy stolen and rescued by a dog. A war that stole 12 whole years. 2 balls in one final. A hand of God and a goal of a century, 4 minutes apart. A stadium of 200,000 people falling utterly silent. Heartbreak, genius, buzzing horns, and a headbutt for the ages. The World Cup isn't just a football tournament. It is the biggest, loudest, most ridiculous, most heartbreaking theater of chaos that we humans have ever managed to invent. And every 4 years, we all pile back in to watch it happen again. If you had fun, stick around and subscribe, because history's wildest stories are just getting started. And trust me, it gets even weirder than a dog named Pickles.